Hi everyone, Nicholas Buffett is here from sunny Cyprus and welcome to today's tutorial. Now you can see it's an Excel tutorial and it's on the sum functions, the sum, SUMIF, and the SUMIFS. Sum is probably the first function you learned to use when you started using Excel, and it's just so easy to use. It's the first function you learn when you start doing maths, addition. So it's all about adding numbers together. When you start, however, considering which numbers you're going to add together, what criteria, and we try to and all these functions together, or and all what we're going to add together, it gets a little bit more complicated. But at the same time, it gets a lot more exciting as well. So I've got an analogy for you, a sweet analogy for you, to show you what it is that we're going to be doing today so you can get a much clearer understanding of these functions before we start looking at them in detail. So here we go. Okay, I told you it was going to be his sweet analogy. Here we have an assortment of M&Ms. Who doesn't love M&Ms? And this picture is an example of a sum function. We have an assortment of all the different colors of M&Ms, and they are both chocolate-filled and nut-filled M&Ms. We're not fussy. We just want to count how many M&Ms we have. And that's an example of a sum function. We don't care what the color they are. We don't care what the filling is. We just want to know how many do we have, and we will just add them all up. Very, very simple. Let's go to our next criteria. This one here, the SUMIF. Now here we can see a bowl of red M&Ms, both nut-filled and chocolate-filled, but red. There's one criteria here, and the criteria is that the M&M has to be red. So that is an example of a SUMIF. You only have one criteria, and based on that criteria, you will count how many M&Ms or whatever it is that you're adding together. Okay. Now this is the criteria is red M&M, but you can put in the comments which is your preferred color of M&Ms. Personally, I like the green ones, but let's do a little survey while we're here. And while you're doing that as well and putting your comment what color you prefer on M&Ms, you can click like and subscribe. Let's move on. Here we have an example of a SUMIF with ORing. So here we've got two criteria, and as long as one of the two criteria is met, we're going to count them. Okay, so here the criteria is the M&M has to be red or it has to be green. I don't care which, as long as it fits the criteria. I don't care if it's chocolate filled or nut filled. I've only got two conditions here. And we can, of course, add to this ORing statement, let's say, by adding more criteria. So we could say green, red, or anything with nuts in it. Okay, that will be fine. So this is an example of ORing. So in this case, we will count all the ones which are either green or red. We will exclude anything which is blue or brown. And now we come to the SUMIFS. Here we have multiple criteria which must be met before we can use it in our sum, before we can add it to our bowl. And the criteria here, it has to be a red M&M and it has to be chocolate filled, not nut filled. So I have two criteria that must be met. So that's our sweet analogy on the different functions we're going to learn. So let's jump to Excel and have a look at these functions. Okay, so here's the spreadsheet we're going to be working with so we can learn these functions. Now, this is probably a good time if you want to pause the video, go to the description of this video, and at the bottom you'll find a link where you can download this spreadsheet and you can use this to practice and learn the sum functions. Also, you can share it with your students freely if you like. If you want to use this as a resource or modify it in any way, that's absolutely great, fantastic. It will be great also if you do mention the channel that you got it from, but you don't have to. So let's begin this tutorial. So first step I always tell my students is analyze the data you have. Become familiar with the data you've been given before you start doing the functions. So I've got here a name column. These are names of workers. In column B, I've got their pay grade. We can see they have a code which identifies their pay grade. Here I've got a job code And on column D, I've got their job description. So this is probably something which I used before as a VLOOKUP or a lookup functions where they have to find the job description based on the code, but we don't care about that in this exercise. Here is their annual salary. And here we've got a scale. Now, what scale means, I really don't know. I just put this together because I wanted to have some decimal values in one of the columns so that my students work with decimal values as well. Okay, so let's jump to the first sum function. We can see we're going to be working in this blue section. We're going to be working with the function sum, just the sum function. So first of all, we're going to click on here and I want to calculate the annual salary, the total. So I need to sum all of the values which are in column E. So to do this, I'm going to start with the equal sign. And this is probably one of the things most people don't understand. Why do we use an equal sign? Well, the equal sign is just like anything else. When we are doing any kind of addition or any type of mathematical calculation, we have an equal sign, and the equal sign represents an equilibrium. Whatever is on the left-hand side of the equal sign is equivalent to what's on the right-hand side. So if you take the values 5 plus 3 equals 8, it means the 5 plus 3 is equivalent to the value 8. But when it comes to Excel, people think that you need the equal sign before you can actually use a function. This is wrong. The equal sign is exactly the same as a maths calculation. Whatever's on the left is equivalent to what's on the right. So what do we have on the left? Well, before we use the equal sign, we select the cell that we want to put our function inside. In this case, H4. And I'm saying H4 equals to, and now I'm going to put what's on the other side, on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So it's going to be equal to the sum of, and I'm going to select my cell range, all of what's in column E. So from here and all the way down to here. So that's basically everything which is column E. Now, if you don't know how I did that, I simply select the first cell or a portion of the first cells. So let me do that again for you. Equals to sum, and I select the first cell, let go of the mouse, scroll down, hold the shift button on the keyboard and click one time on the other end of my range. And then I can let go. And that will basically select the range of cells that I want. Just makes it easier than clicking and dragging. Close the brackets, press enter, and there's my value. Now, because I use cell ranges E2 to E32, that means that anything that changes in these cells will automatically update what's in cell H4. So if I change that 7,400 to 888888 and I press enter, we can see that value automatically updates. And that's a great thing about using cell references. So using the set reference of cells E2 to E32 instead of typing the numbers in manually. Let's go to the sum ranges F13 to F15 and F22 to F30. So here we're adding multiple ranges together. So I'm going to go equals to sum, open the brackets. I'm going to select the cell range F3 to F15. So I'm just going to do a quick click and drag because I'm in the same window here. It's easier. And I'm going to use a comma to separate my next range or my next number, which is F22 to F30. So that's going to be from here. Oh, I made a mistake there. I forgot to do, oh, no, I didn't. I used a comma. So I thought I made a mistake because I had to press the control button, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. And I close the brackets and press enter. Now, what did I mean by the control button? I can do this equals to sum, and I can choose from F3 to F15, and instead of manually adding the comma now, I can leave that, scroll down, and I'm going to go hold the control button on my keyboard, and then while I'm holding the control button, I click and drag F22 to F30. And what that will do, that will allow me to select multiple ranges, and it will add the comma for me automatically. So it's up to you how you do that. Okay. Now, please notice I'm not using the function wizards. I never teach using the wizards. And the reason why, if you don't understand how to build the function yourself and understand the different parameters, the different things that we put inside the brackets, then you will never truly understand how a function works. And that means you will never really be able to make the function work the way that you want it to work when you want to do, let's say, more advanced functions. So I'm going to press enter. There's my value. Next one, I'm going to use a sum range F3 to F15, and I'm going to use another cell reference, a criteria, which is this one here. It's exactly the same as before. This is a bit repetitive, but I do like going over all the angles, or as many as I possibly can. Okay, so I could put here comma, and instead of putting, instead of using I'm going to add the value 10. Okay, so here I'm putting in a constant. I'm not going to be able to change this, and I'm going to close the brackets, and that's going to add whatever the total of these cell range is plus the number 10. Okay, now if I do that, then I cannot change that value 10 unless I open the formula and change the function, well, change the value 10 from there. If instead I used this cell reference, I7, then like before, I will be able to update the value 10 to, let's say, whatever I'm going to update it to, and that will update. So that's the difference of using a cell reference or using a constant, which is where we type the number in. Okay, let's have a look at embedding a function inside the function. So here I'm going to do the sum of all the annual salary, everything in column E, and I'm going to add that to the average of the work. Oh, that should be scale. I changed the name of the scale. So here we've got, there's my scale column there. Okay. So to do this, I'm going to say again, H12 equals to the sum of, I'm going to select my range of the annual salary like that. And now I'm going to put a comma and I'm going to put my next criteria. Now, my next criteria is going to be another function. It's going to be the average. And here's where that equal sign explanation comes in. Can you see? I don't put an equal sign before the average because you don't add the equal signs in front of the function names. The equal sign has a purpose. The left side is equivalent to the right side. So the equal sign here is essentially H12 equals to whatever the result of this is going to be. So here I'm going to have the average of the scale column. I just did a bit of a click and drag there, close the brackets. Let's just go back up. Now that's closed my red bracket. I need to close the black bracket as well. Just like maths, you have to, as many brackets you have open, you have to have the same amount of brackets closed. Press enter there. And now you can see how I have now created a function with a function inside. So I'm using the sum function, but I've embedded the average function inside there as a parameter. That was the sum function. So now let's move on to the SUMIF function. Okay, so SUMIF. Now, if you remember at the start, we did the analogy with M&Ms, and we said that this analogy, the SUMIF, is where we have one criteria. So we want to count all the M&Ms which are red. We don't care if they are nut filled or chocolate filled, but there's only one criteria, they have to be red. Otherwise, we don't count them. So in this particular example, we want to calculate the salary based on the pay grade. So the pay grade has to be A1. And if they're A1, we will count that. Well, let's have a look and see what that means. So here we've got the pay grade column from here all the way down to here. And the way this works is we need to select the range of cells which contains the criteria. And in this particular case, the range of cells with the criteria is going to the pay grade. And we're going to find everywhere where the pay grade is equal to A1. Whenever I find a match, like this one here inside B2, I'm going to take the corresponding value of the range, which I'm going to add. So the SUMIF requires that you have two ranges, two equivalent ranges selected. So when I say equivalent, if you've got 10 items or 10 rows in the criteria range, you must have 10 rows in the salary range or in the sum range. So these are my two ranges from B2 all the way down to B32. That's going to be my criteria range. And then from E2 all the way down to E32, that's going to be my sum range, the numbers I'm going to use to add if what's in the criteria range is true. So if I'm looking for all the values where I'm going to add if they are pay grade A1, then I will look in my criteria grade, find where there's an A1. Wherever I find an A1, I'm going to add that number. to the rest of them. This one, for example, is not going to be added because its pay grade is A2. This one is not going to be added because it's B2. So let's do that. So we're going to start off here. Again, we're going to say that H16, this is the cell where I want my answer to go in, equals to, we're going to start with SUMIF. And the great thing with Excel, it gives you the parameters it wants at the bottom. So I'm now looking for the range. Then I'm going to want the criteria, and then I want the sum range. So my range is going to be my criteria range. I'm going to select my criteria range to be from here to here. This is the column I'm going to look up to find if something's true. Okay. Then I'm going to put a comma. Now it wants the criteria. So the criteria that I want is that whatever's inside my criteria range is actually equal to A1. I'm going to use text first. And to use text, I'm going to use the speech marks there. So I'm going to put the value A1 in speech marks. And then I'm going to put a comma, and I use speech marks. So whenever you're going to refer to something inside an Excel function, and that something is not a cell reference, and it is not a number, you must put it in speech marks, okay? So that what you're putting in those speech marks is text. It's not a number, and it's not a cell reference. The last parameter is the sum range. Well, when I find something which is true inside the criteria range, where am I going to get the number I'm going to add? And in this case, it's going to be from here all the way down to here. Okay, and that's it. That's my SUMIF. I've given it the range of cells. I've given it the criteria to look inside that range of cells. And whenever it finds a match, it's going to add the corresponding number in the sum range. So in this case, it will take the number 20,000. I'm going to press enter. And it's given me 20,000. And the reason is there is no other pay grade with A1. So let's see what happens if I change one of these. If I change this D1 now to an A1, now look what happens. It's now gone to 28,000 because A1 has got 8,000, and there's my answer. Okay, so because inside my criteria range, inside this B1, it's found another one called A1. So it's found this one and, sorry, that one. These two here have got A1 in the criteria range in the pay grade. Then it's taking the corresponding values of the annual salary and summing them. That is the SUMIF. So let's move on to the other ones now that you've understood the SUMIF. I'm going to do exactly the same thing here, equals to SUMIF. The only difference now is instead of you adding text, I'm going to use a cell reference. I'm going to use all the ones where it's D2. So SUMIF, I'm going to be using the pay grade. That's my criteria range, comma. The criteria is whatever's inside J15, which is in this case the letters or the cell reference D2, comma. I don't put speech marks on that because D2 is a cell reference. And then I'm going to use my sum range, which is this one here. So now in this SUMIF function, what I am doing is I'm looking up inside the column B, the pay grade, finding everywhere there's a match to my criteria, which is whatever's inside J14, so D2. So it's going to be looking for the pay grade D2 and adding the corresponding value. That's 29,600. And it's always good to double check. So if I change one of these now to a D2 job code, that number has now automatically updated. So I'm going to undo that. And then if I take a value which is D2, this one here for the pay grade, and change that to, let's say, CC, then it's no longer D2. So that should now go down. And there you go. It's changed. Great. Let's look at another one. I'm going to do some text searching now. So I want a total salary of all handymen. So this is exactly the same as these ones here. But instead of looking A1, I'm looking for text and again, a cell range. Not much difference. I'm just going to go through this really quickly. So equals to SUMIF. open brackets. Notice I'm not copy pasting. I'm typing these functions out again and again because that's the only way you're going to learn. So my range is going to be my range here. Actually, no, I want the word handyman now. You see what happens when you rush? So equals to if open brackets. This time I'm going to be looking up the text. So instead of the code, I'm going to be looking up this text here. Okay. And my criteria is going to be the word handyman. So that needs to go into speech marks. Handyman, close the speech marks. And the sum range is going to be, again, the salary. There we go. Close the brackets and enter. Now, the next one is going to be using the job code, HA, exactly the same as before. So equals to SUMIF. Again, this time I'm going to be using the job code as my search. So I'm doing this so we can use multiple different criteria ranges. And this time I'm going to be using the cell reference here, HA, comma, and again, the total salary for my sum value. We're going to do another one now. So can you see here, I've got exactly the same number. So this was using the text value, handyman, by looking at the job description. And this one was using this reference. Now, if I change, because here I was using a reference, if I change this code now to, let's say, everyone who is a stable hand, which is ST, now automatically this is calculated for me everyone who is a stable hand. The same up here, when I did this one here with text, okay, that was everyone with A1. And this one I did with the cell reference here, what's inside J14. I can now instead just change this to, let's say, C2. And this is the annual salary of everyone with the C2 pay grade. So this is the great thing about using cell references instead of hard coding constants like this, A1. Because the only way to change that is to actually modify the function. And this is quite easy in a small function, but you've got a really long function with embedded functions, it gets a lot more complicated. So you're better off using cell references. Okay, here we've got a total salary of all staff with the name that contains the letters SE. So here we're going to learn a little bit about wildcards. Now, to do this, I've put this together for you. Oh, let's see. Okay, so if I want to find from this range of names, all the names which equal to Prabir Das, then you would just put in the criteria, speech marks, Prabir Das. Okay, bit hard for me to write with this thing. All right, and that will return only one value. Now, if I wanted to find all the ones where the name begins with an N, then I'm going to put speech marks N asterisk. So the asterisk is actually the wildcard. It's saying that the start has to be the letter N, and we don't care what comes after the N. That's absolutely fine. So in this case, it will return as true this one and this one. There are two because these two begin with the letter N. If I wanted all the ones that end with the letter A, for example, I will put that asterisk and the letter A. Now, the reason I'm putting this in speech marks is because asterisk is not a number. Asterisk A, N asterisk is not a number. So it has to be in speech marks. So this criteria here will return that one, and that one. 3 returns, unless I've missed one. No. Now, if I want to return all the ones that contain the letters, let's say TT, then that will be equals to asterisk TT asterisk. Now, this basically means as long as something has whatever on the front, I don't care what comes at the end, as long as somewhere the two letters TT appear in the middle. The middle, the beginning, or the end. Why the beginning and the end? Because I've got an asterisk at the beginning and an asterisk at the end, which could also be TT. So that's fine. But as long as somewhere it's got the letters TT, then it will return it. So in this case, it's going to return, let me get rid of these ones. It's going to return that one there. I don't think, oh, and this one. Okay, do I have anything else with two T's? No. So that's how the wildcard works. Okay, so let's do this here. So I want from here, I'm going to do equals to SUMIF, open the brackets. So I want the salary again, and I'm going to be looking at the names. Okay, so from here, my criteria range is going to be the names, comma, my criteria is going to be wherever it contains the letters SE. So it says contains anywhere, beginning, end, or middle. So I'm going to put an asterisk, SE asterisk, comma for the next criteria, and my sum range again is going to be my annual salary. There we go. Close up brackets. And what have I done extra? I've done something wrong here. Asterisk SE. Oh, I forgot to close my speech marks. Can you see? There you go. Okay, so it's A2 to A32. My next criteria is asterisk star SE asterisks with my speech marks, and there we go. So that should work. Now, remember, we always test this, so I can just add somewhere here, let's say the SE at the end, and that should change that value. There you go. Okay, and I can also do a quick double check by finding one that's got SE, for example, this one here, number 70, Sengupta, and just delete the SE from there, and that value has changed again. All right, there we go. Let's just undo that. Last one for the SUMIF, we've got a total salary of all staff pay grade D2 or C3. Now that's this analogy here, the SUMIF, but now we want to add all the ones which are either green or red. I don't care if they're chocolate filled or nut filled, but I want to all these together. So if it's green or red, I want to add them together. And to do this, we're going to combine the sum function with the SUMIF. So essentially what I want to do is do a SUMIF, which is going to add all the ones which are D2 pay grade, do another SUMIF, which is all the ones which are C3 pay grade, and then add the two together. So I'm going to encase both of these inside a sum function. So I'm going to do a SUMIF, and that's going to have the criteria red. Okay, I'm not going to do the whole function. So that's going to be the SUMIF, the criteria range. The criteria is going to be red, and then the sum range, what it's going to add. I'm also going to do another SUMIF. You're going to see how I'm going to build this up, where the criteria is going to be green. Okay, and I'm going to put all of these inside a sum function. And that's going to open there. That's going to be my comma, and that's where it's going to close. So you can see this is a sum function. This is my first number it's going to add, because this is going to be the number of red M&Ms, and this is going to be the number of green M&Ms. So let's say this is 10, and that's 13. That's exactly the same as writing equals sum 10, comma 13. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to sum the SUMIF functions. Okay, so let's go back. So here we go. Let's build this up now. So we start off with equals to sum. That's going to be my sum function. And I'm going to write my first value, which is SUMIF. We want a pay grade of D2. So here is my pay grade criteria range, comma. I'm going to use the cell references here. So D2, so whatever's inside I24, comma, and my sum range is going to be the annual salary. So this SUMIF function here, from here to here, that SUMIF is going to return the total of that salary for everyone with a pay grade of D2. Then I'm going to put a comma, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I can just copy paste this now, so I don't have to type this. I don't normally do this, but here we go. And this is going to be the SUMIF, the same pay grade criteria range, but this time instead of I24, we're going to be looking at J24. So that's all the ones with C3 pay grade and the same annual salary. And then we close that. Okay, so this is the result of the SUMIF where the pay grade is D2. This is the result of the SUMIF where the pay grade is C3. And here is my sum function, which is going to add both of these together. Press enter. There we go. And I can test this. So I could very easily change one of these from, let's say, C1 to D2, and that value should increase. There we go. And because I've used cell references, I can change this to, instead of adding the red and the green M&Ms, or D2 with C3 pay grade, I can change that to, let's say, C2 and C3 straight away. Okay. So really great using those those cell references. That's the SUMIF and how we can OR SUMIFs using the sum function. All right, let's jump over to SUMIFS. Okay, so first of all, we have to understand what parameters are required for the SUMIFS and understand what the SUMIFS statement does. And then we can build this function so it makes sense. Now, if you remember the analogy was we had all red M&Ms and they had to be chocolate filled. So there were two criteria that had to be met. So with this example, I've got a screenshot here of the data we're going to be using. And what I'm going to do here, I've got my two criteria. I'm saying that the pay grade must be C3, and you can see that down here. And the job code must be MA. And if both of these are true, then it will add the annual salary. So if we have a look where we have a true, so if we find the C3, so this is C3, but the job code is not MA, so that's no good. Here I've got, here we go. Here I've got C3 and the job code is MA. So this one is going to be included, and that means it's going to use this number here, 8,000, because this has met both of the criteria. The pay grade is C3 and the job code is MA. Do we have another one? So if we go down, C3 SE, that's no good. That one is no good. No, that's no good because that's C3 and SH. This one down here, we've got C3 and MA. Okay, so that's going to use this number here. So in this range of cells that we've got here, it's going to add the numbers 8,000 and 14,350. That will be the result. Why? Because only these two records, record 6 and record 17, meet both the criteria. Now, the next thing that we need to understand is, for this to work, we used three different things, and one thing was constant. The constant one was this range of cells here, the annual salary. Okay, so this one here was the constant. This range of cells, the annual salary is always going to be the same. That range of cells is where we're going to get the answers from, the answers which we're going to add together. So the only thing that changed essentially was the criteria range and the criteria. And this is really important. So when we're going to do the SUMIFS, we're going to nominate the sum range, which in this case was column E. We're only going to nominate that one time because the column we're going to take the numbers we're going to add from is always going to be the same one. But we're going to say multiple times for the different criteria we have, the different criteria range and the criteria, which in this case is going to be the pay grade and criteria C3, and then the next criteria range, which is the job code criteria range, all of this one here, and its criteria MA. So we only nominate the sum range one time. Let's go have a look at that now. So SUMIFS, here I want to calculate and find the sum of all of the total salary where the pay grade is C1 and the job code is TG. I'm going to be using the cell references again instead of typing them as constants. So let's begin. If we have a look here, equals to SUMIFS, and we're saying equals because we're saying that H31 equals to the result of SUMIFS. The first thing that I want to include here is the sum range, which is that range of cells with the numbers I'm going to be adding together. And that's this one here. And you're going to see we're not going to have to nominate this again, comma. And if we have a look at the bottom, now what we need to do is nominate the criteria range and criteria range 1. Then we want criteria 1, criteria range 2, criteria 2. So let's have a look. Criteria range 1. Well, the first one is that the pay grade is C1. So I need to select the pay grade. That's my criteria range, comma. And now it wants criteria 1. So what is the criteria for the items in this criteria range, B2 to B31? Well, the criteria is going to be everything that equals to C1, which is what's inside I29. So then it wants, if I want to add another one, another criteria, which I do, I'm going to put a comma. If I don't, I can close that, and that is exactly the same as a SUMIF. So I've used SUMIFS as a SUMIF because there's only one criteria. But if I want multiple criteria, that's where the ifs comes in. I'm going to get rid of the bracket. I'm going to put comma. And now it says, what is your criteria range 2? Well, my second criteria range is going to be the job code. That's my criteria range, comma. And what criteria are you looking for, criteria 2, in that criteria range? Well, I want all the ones where the job code is TG, and I'm going to use my cell reference here. I could type it in. I could do this. Speech marks, TG, speech marks. But again, I don't like using constants because it's harder to change the value. So it depends on what you want to do. So I'm just going to use the cell reference. So here what it's doing is the sum range is the blue one. There it is there. My criteria range 1 is the red one. There it is. And I'm looking for the criteria I29, which is C1, wherever I find the C1. My next criteria range is the green one. That's the job code. And the criteria is going to be for that J29, which is TG. Let's press enter. There we go. So now only the ones where the pay grade is C1 and the job code is TG will be included. Let's test it. So I'm going to find any one of these which has got TG. So that one's included, C1 and TG. Do I have another one? This is C1 and HA. It's not included. So if I change the job code to TG, let's check it out. There you go. That value down here, it changed. Works perfect. And again, because I use cell range, cell references, I can change that from C3 to TG, for example, C3, sorry, and I've got nothing. That basically means I don't have any workers with a pay grade of C3 and a job code of TG. But if I change it to something that does exist, say C3 and MA, like the example we gave before, so C3 MA, there we go. I do have some, and I can see I've got that one, so that one, so I've got 3, and that one. So there are 4. So those 4. Okay. Let's do one more. And this is going to be our last one. Total salary of all where hours worked is 1. Now this is hours worked. Now this is where I changed that. I changed that to scale. So I'm going to change that where scale is 1. Okay. Let's just make that correct. Okay, so scale is 1 and name ends in A. So exactly the same thing as before, but all we're doing now is we're using some text manipulation as well. We're going to be looking at text as well. So equals to, again, same thing as before, SUMIFS. First of all is going to be my sum range, and that's going to be the salary again, comma. And my criteria range, well, I want all the ones with the salary of where scale is 1. So that's going to be in the range for the scale, that one there, scale, comma, and I want the value 1. Now, again, I can put the number 1 because it's a number, but I can also just use the cell ref. Actually, let's just do it with numbers this time. We'll do it as constants. So that's going to be the number 1. I don't need speech marks because 1 is a number. And then my criteria range 2, so that's going to be where the name ends in A. So I want the name. That's my criteria range. And the criteria is going to be it ends in A. So speech marks, I can do star asterisk. Now I can put a asterisk, a speech marks, or I can put it gets a bit more complicated, but I'll do that as well. I would do this like this. Why don't I try that now? So I'm going to put the asterisk in speech marks. I'm going to concatenate that with whatever's inside here. So that's basically saying asterisk and whatever's inside J32. So asterisk 31. Okay, let's see if this works. Close that. That should work. All right, so let's check. If I change this one here and I change the end of it to an A, and I want the scale of 1, so I change that to a 1. There you go. It did work. Okay. So basically what I did there, you can modify it. So I used, because I wanted to use the reference uses a cell reference J32. So I can't put asterisk J32 and I can't do this. So if I make this a constant now, I'm not able to do this J32 because then it will say it's looking for the text asterisk. It has to end in J32 because it's inside the speech marks, making it think this is text. Whereas I don't want that as text. I want that to be the cell reference. And if I do this, there's nothing which is joining that asterisk to the contents of J32. So to join things together, you need to use the concat symbol, which is the and sign, the ampersand sign, and then put that. So that is actually saying asterisk and whatever's inside J32. Okay, that was the SUMIFS. So what an awesome function that is. I hope you've really learned something new in this. I hope you understood the sum, the SUMIF, the SUMIFS. More importantly, about understanding the OR and the ANDing of sum. So when we're ORing, we can use the sum functions to OR the values together. And SUMIFS automatically does an ANDing of the statement. So this and this has to be true. So if you like this video, if you've learned something new, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.